Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because after this story, you might never take a late-night drive again. It was just after 11:42 p.m. when the call came in. Two teenagers had stumbled upon a blood-soaked sedan parked along an isolated stretch of County Road 16, known locally as Lover's Lane. The headlights were still on, the windows were fogged, and through the misted glass, the silhouette of two people sat motionless in the front seats. Deputy Carson Hale arrived first. His cruiser lights painted the woods red and blue, the sound of cicadas muffled by the hum of his engine. He approached slowly, hand on his holster, flashlight cutting to the thick Virginia air. When the beam landed on the car's windshield, his breath caught. Inside sat a young couple, early 20s, faces pale, eyes open. The girl slumped against the window. The boy, his hands gripping the steering wheel, as if frozen in his last moment of terror. The interior was a massacre. Blood on the dashboard, bullet holes in the glass, a lipstick smear on the passenger mirror. But what chilled Hale most wasn't the gore. It was a note tucked neatly under the wiper blade. Written in red ink, it read, "Love is a lie. You were warned." Within an hour, the scene was crawling with police and FBI agents. The victims were identified as Rebecca Langley, a 21-year-old nursing student, and Ethan Carr, a 23-year-old mechanic. They had been dating for 6 months. Locals knew them as inseparable, always laughing, always together. But now, under the cold beam of police flashlights, they were the center of something far darker. Reporters swarmed the scene before dawn, calling it the Lover's Lane Slaughter. The name stuck. It spread like wildfire across state lines. Detective Marla Quinn was assigned lead investigator, a sharp, methodical officer known for solving cold cases that others couldn't. Standing beside the car that morning, she noticed something off. The gunshots were precise. 2 to the chest for Ethan, 1 to the head for Rebecca. No signs of sexual assault, no robbery. Wallets intact. Phones missing. "This wasn't random," she murmured. "This was personal." The investigation began with a digital deep dive. Rebecca's social media showed a life that looked perfect. Sunsets, coffee dates, smiling selfies. But Ethan's phone records painted another story. 2 weeks before the murder, he'd received a series of anonymous texts. "You took what wasn't yours. Meet me at the lane or I'll come to you." The messages came from an untraceable number. No name, no signal origin. Whoever sent them knew how to hide. Then came the neighbors' accounts. A resident who lived a mile away from Lover's Lane claimed she heard a car door slam around midnight, followed by a woman's scream, and then 3 sharp cracks echoing through the woods. Another witness, a gas station clerk, recalled seeing a dark SUV idling near the road just an hour earlier. But perhaps the most unsettling detail emerged when investigators reviewed old case files. 12 years earlier, another couple had been found dead on that same stretch of road. Different town, same circumstances. A young woman shot in the head, a boyfriend riddled with bullets, a note pinned to the windshield. That message read, "Love makes fools of us all." The case was never solved. Quinn knew it couldn't be coincidence. The handwriting matched almost perfectly. Same slanted loop, same trailing L at the end of love. Someone was recreating a pattern, a ritual of revenge that stretched over a decade. The media frenzy hit new heights. News anchors speculated about a serial killer who only struck young lovers. Talk shows debated whether this was the work of a scorned ex, a copycat, or someone close to the law enforcement. But the most disturbing twist came from Ethan's family. His older sister, Allison, came forward days later, tearfully revealing that Ethan had recently broken off an affair with a married woman named Cynthia Vaughn. Cynthia's husband, Mark Vaughn, was a former Marine, now working as a security contractor, a man with access to weapons, training, and a reputation for jealousy. When detectives knocked on Mark's door, he didn't deny knowing Ethan. "Yeah, I knew the kid," he said, leaning on the frame. "He fixed my truck once. Decent mechanic." His eyes didn't flicker once. Calm, collected, too collected. But inside his garage, police found something that made their blood run cold. A collection of vintage photographs from the 1990s showing the site of the old Lover's Lane murders. Some even included close-up shots of the victims that were never made public. "How'd you get these?" Detective Quinn asked. Mark shrugged. "They were my father's." He was a cop back then. Turns out his father, Harold Vaughn, had been one of the original investigators on the 2013 Lover's Lane case. He retired abruptly the following year. Died of a stroke soon after. The old file had been buried, but the photos had stayed in the family. That night, as Quinn pored over the evidence in her office, she noticed something strange about the old photos. One picture, dated the night of the first murders, showed a faint reflection in the rear window of the victim's car. A man standing just beyond the tape, his features blurry, but his stance unmistakable. He wasn't wearing a uniform. When Quinn digitally enhanced the image, she froze. The man was wearing a black leather jacket, and around his neck hung a silver locket identical to the one found on Rebecca Langley's body just days ago. Was it possible that the killer wasn't Mark, but someone connected to both cases? The next morning, Quinn returned to the Vaughn residence with a search warrant, but the house was empty. Cynthia's car was gone. Mark's truck missing. Only a single item sat on the kitchen counter, a folded note. "Love ends where truth begins." The handwriting was the same. That's when a call came to the police scanner. An abandoned SUV found just outside the city limits. Engine still running, doors open. Quinn raced to the scene. The headlights illuminated a broken fence. Tire marks leading into the forest. She followed them on foot, her flashlight trembling as she pushed through the underbrush. Then she saw it, half buried under the pine needles, a freshly dug mound of dirt. She dropped to her knees, brushing away the soil. A woman's hand, pale, cold, a wedding ring still on the finger. Cynthia Vaughn. Her throat tightened. This wasn't revenge. This was escalation. Somewhere in those woods, the real killer was still watching. And when the officers opened the trunk of the abandoned SUV, what they found changed everything. If you think the first part was bad, wait until you see how deep this goes. Like, comment, and subscribe, because this next part, it's pure nightmare fuel. Detective Marla Quinn stood over the open trunk. The smell of gasoline and copper thick in the air. Inside was a small metal box, rusted, dented, and sealed with a blood-smeared padlock. Nobody, no weapon, just that box. An officer pried it open, and what spilled out silenced everyone around. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all showing the same scene. Young couples at Lover's Lane, different faces, different years, but every one of them was captured in the exact same way. Through a cracked car window, frozen in intimacy, unaware the camera aimed at them. There was also a cassette tape, labeled in faded red ink, "Confession." Quinn's hands trembled as she placed the tape into an old player from the evidence van. Static hissed. Then a voice, calm male, with the faintest southern drawl, filled the air. "This isn't about killing. It's about reminding them what love really does to people. My father started it. I'm finishing it." The room went silent. Quinn's throat tightened as realization struck. The killer wasn't just mimicking Harold Vaughn's old case. He was continuing it. The next voice on the tape was softer, trembling. A woman. "Cynthia." "Mark." "Please, you don't have to." Then a sound. A thud. A scream. The tape clicked off. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was brought in overnight. They confirmed what Quinn already feared. The killings were part of a generational cycle. The father, Harold Vaughn, might have started the pattern. The son, Mark, was carrying it on. But the timeline didn't add up. Harold's first suspected victims were in 2013. Mark would have been barely 16. Too young. Unless he was there, watching, learning. By dawn, search teams combed the forest where Cynthia's body had been found. What they discovered less than a mile away confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. A makeshift campsite buried deep among the trees. Inside the tent were hunting knives, night vision goggles, and photographs of Quinn herself, taken from outside her apartment window. She was being watched. The investigation turned inward. Every officer was now a potential target. Lover's Lane was sealed off. But that didn't stop the flood of true crime YouTubers and journalists camping at the perimeter, hoping for a headline. Some called Mark a modern-day Zodiac. Others said he was a ghost. No fingerprints. No phone trail. Not a single ATM camera. That changed 3 days later, when a gas station clerk 20 miles north recognized Mark Vaughn's photo on the news. He'd come in around 2 a.m., hands shaking, and bought a can of gasoline and a disposable camera. On his way out, he said something odd. Some things have to burn to be remembered. The next day, the Lovers Lane crime scene was ablaze. Someone had doused the area in fuel and torched the evidence tents, the cars, and even the trees. Everything turned to black ash. And in the center of the road, written in soot, were the words, "The last lovers died tonight." Quinn's stomach dropped. She ordered immediate citywide surveillance. Couples reported being followed. Some claimed they'd found red ink notes on their windshields. Panic spread like wildfire. Then came the shocker, an anonymous tip. A man claiming to be the real killer called 911 from a payphone outside a diner in Arlington. "I never killed those kids," he said, voice shaking. "He's using my name. He's framing me. You need to find the other Vaughn, the one Harold never claimed." The line went dead before they could trace it. The other Vaughn? Digging through old records, Quinn unearthed something long buried. Harold Vaughn had a second son, born from an affair he'd kept hidden for decades. The child had been given up for adoption after his mother's death. Name changed. Location unknown. DNA from the blood found on Cynthia's fingernails confirmed the unthinkable. It wasn't Mark's. It belonged to someone with a 50% genetic match, a half-brother. That meant the real killer was still out there. And Mark Vaughn? He might not be the monster after all. But if not him, where was he? The next 48 hours blurred into chaos. Reports came in of a stolen vehicle, a police cruiser. Witnesses saw a man matching Mark's description near the interstate, headed south. Quinn, exhausted but relentless, led the pursuit herself. The chase cut through rain-slick highways and abandoned service roads. At one point, she caught a glimpse of him in her headlights, his face pale, his eyes sunken. He wasn't running from her. He was running from someone else. Quinn's car fishtailed as she followed him into the old mill road, a dead end. When she stepped out, the cruiser's door swung open. Mark was gone, but a flashlight beam caught something in the mud, a trail of footprints leading into the mill. Inside, the air reeked of oil and rot. Metal creaked. Water dripped from the rafters. And then, faintly, she heard it, a voice echoing from somewhere in the dark. "You shouldn't have followed him, detective." Quinn spun around, gun drawn. A man stepped out from the shadows. Tall, wearing a torn jacket, hair matted with rain. His face was eerily calm. He was never the one you should have been chasing. She recognized him instantly. The same face from the enhanced photo in the 2013 case file. The same locket. "Who are you?" Quinn demanded. The one he couldn't kill. The man smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that chilled her to the bone. "Harold Vaughn wasn't my father. He was my teacher." A flash of lightning illuminated his features, familiar yet wrong. He looked like Mark, but older, weathered, eyes darker. Before Quinn could react, he hurled something at her feet, a Polaroid. It showed Mark, bound and gagged, somewhere underground. "You find him," the man said softly, stepping back into the shadows. "But when you do, you'll wish you hadn't." Then he was gone, vanished into the storm. Quinn clutched the photo, her pulse racing. The background looked familiar. Brick walls, pipes, and a concrete floor. She'd seen that place before. The old train depot. Backup arrived minutes later, but the trail was already cold. The rain washed away the prints, the scent in the tracks. But the evidence in her hand confirmed it. There were two killers bound by blood and revenge. One following the father's legacy. The other was determined to finish it his way. As dawn broke over the blackened remains of Lover's Lane, Quinn stood silent among the ashes. Her phone buzzed. An email notification. No sender ID. Subject line: "The night isn't over." Attached was a video file. She pressed play. Mark Vaughn, tied to a chair, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "He's coming for you next, detective." And when he does, don't trust the badge. The video cut to static. And then, just before the screen went black, a whisper bled through the speakers. Low, cold, and deliberate. Love ends where truth begins. If you're watching this far, you might want to lock your doors. Hit subscribe, because this ending, you won't believe who's been behind it all along. Detective Marla Quinn hadn't slept in 36 hours. The room around her was cluttered with case files, photos, and maps dotted with red pins stretching from the first Lover's Lane killings to the latest inferno. Mark Vaughn's face stared back from a dozen screens, his terrified eyes frozen in that video. Somewhere out there, he was still alive. And somewhere close, so it was a man who had taken him. The FBI wanted her off the case. You're compromised, they said. He's targeting you now. They were right. But Quinn didn't care. This had stopped being the case the moment she saw her own photo on that campsite wall. It was personal now. The email's video metadata gave her a single clue, a GPS tag embedded in the last frame. Coordinates pointing to an abandoned freight depot on the edge of town, the same one from the Polaroid. It had been closed since 2008 after a derailment killed 6 workers. Locals said the place was cursed. Tonight, it would live up to the name. Quinn moved in alone. The depot was massive, 3 stories of rusted steel and echoing tunnels. Her flashlight beam cut through the dust, illuminating old graffiti and half-collapsed walls. Water dripped from a leaking pipe above. Every sound seemed to follow her like footsteps. Then she saw it, a trail of red spray paint leading down the corridor, with arrows pointing deeper into the darkness. She followed slowly, gun raised, the words scrawled along the walls growing clearer with every step. Love, betrayal, truth. At the end of the corridor, a heavy metal door stood slightly ajar. From inside came the sound of muffled cries. She pushed it open. Mark Vaughn sat slumped in a chair, bound at the wrists, breathing shallowly. He looked up, eyes wild. Don't, he's still here. Before she could react, a metal chain whipped across the room, striking her flashlight from her hand. The beam spun across the floor, landing on a figure emerging from the shadows. The same man from Mill, the locket glinting under the dim light. You shouldn't have come alone, he said softly. Quinn steadied her aim, hands where I can see them. He smiled, stepping closer, unafraid. You don't understand. I didn't kill them because I hated them. I killed them because they lied. About what? Quinn demanded. About love. He tilted his head, voice calm. My father taught me that love makes you weak, makes you careless. That's why he did what he did, to prove that devotion can destroy. Her pulse quickened. Your father, Harold Vaughn? He nodded slowly. You know what the police never figured out? My mother was one of his victims. He killed her in the first Lover's Lane case. He called it justice. I call it inheritance. Quinn's stomach dropped. You're his son, too. A faint smile. No, I'm his masterpiece. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recorder. Press play. Harold Vaughn's voice, hoarse, trembling, decades old, filled the room. He watched me that night. My boy. He didn't cry. He just stared. The killer laughed softly, lowering the device. He thought he was teaching me fear. But what he really taught me was how to finish what he started. Mark groaned, struggling against the ropes. He killed Cynthia? He's not my brother. He's my father's other son. The man's eyes flickered with rage. Half-brother, he corrected coldly. You took his name. I took his purpose. Suddenly, a loud creak echoed through the building. Police sirens blaring outside. Backup had arrived. Quinn didn't move. She knew if she hesitated, he'd vanish again. Put it down, she ordered, stepping closer. But instead of obeying, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a detonator. Every love story needs an ending. The floor trembled. Quinn's gaze darted to walls. Wires ran along the floor, leading to barrels stacked near the door. Gasoline! In a split-second decision, she lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. The detonator clattered to ground. They struggled, grunts, fists, and the sound of metal scraping concrete. Mark screamed for help, but the ropes held him tight. A gunshot echoed. The man staggered back, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Quinn stood, arm extended, gun smoking. He laughed through the pain, his voice a rasp. "You think it ends with me?" He fell to his knees, eyes locking with hers. "It never ends. Love always kills." Then he collapsed. Officers flooded the room seconds later. Quinn cut Mark free, her hands shaking. "It's over," she whispered. But as they dragged the half-brother's body away, something caught her eye, the silver locket around his neck. She reached for it, opened it, and froze. Inside were 2 photographs, one of Harold Vaughn holding a baby and one of her. A Polaroid of Detective Marla Quinn, taken years ago, standing outside her childhood home. Her breath stopped. Mark stared at her. "What is it?" She couldn't speak. The realization crashed over her like ice. Harold Vaughn had worked in her hometown precinct when she was a child. He'd investigated her father's car accident, the one she was told was an accident. But now, the truth twisted everything she knew. The Vaughns weren't just killers who targeted couples. They had targeted her family. 2 days later, the official report listed the killer as deceased. The case was marked closed. The town of Ashburn began to move on, but Quinn couldn't. The sleepless nights returned. Every shadow felt like someone watching. Then, late one evening, she received a brown envelope at her doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. A man and woman, newlyweds, sitting in a car at Lover's Lane. Their faces blurred, but the message written across the bottom was clear. The legacy continues. The phone rang. A distorted voice spoke, calm and deliberate. "You thought you killed him, but you only ended one story. The next begins soon." The line went dead. Quinn's eyes burned as she looked out her window toward the dark forest beyond. Somewhere out there, the past wasn't finished. And as the screen fades to black, one final line appears. They thought the killer was gone. But 3 months later, another couple vanished from Lover's Lane. "If you think this story was intense," the narrator whispers, "you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes after the Lover's Lane slaughter."